You're scrolling through social media and you see another post about someone retiring early on dividend income. They're sipping coffee on a beach somewhere while their portfolio pays all their bills. You think to yourself, that sounds amazing, but I'm 35 and barely have anything saved. There's no way I could do that in 3 years. What if I told you that retiring on dividends in just 3 years isn't just possible, but that the math actually works? Now, before you roll your eyes and click away, I'm not talking about some get-rich-quick scheme or crypto miracle. I'm talking about real dividend investing with real numbers that you can verify yourself. Here's the thing. Most people think dividend retirement takes decades because they're thinking about it all wrong. They assume you need millions in the bank to generate enough passive income. But what if you only needed to cover your essential expenses? What if you could live comfortably on $2,000 or $3,000 a month instead of trying to replace a $80,000 salary? The average person spends way too much time thinking about the obstacles instead of focusing on what's actually required. They get overwhelmed by the big numbers and never start. But here's what most financial advisors won't tell you. The 3-year dividend retirement strategy isn't about accumulating massive wealth. It's about being strategic with your expenses and aggressive with your investing approach. If you're interested in learning how this unconventional path could work for you, make sure to subscribe to the channel and hit the like button if this information helps you out. I'm going to break down the exact math, show you the portfolio strategy, and explain why 3 years might be more realistic than you think. Now here's the real question. How much money do you actually need to retire on dividends? Most retirement calculators will tell you to multiply your annual expenses by 25. So if you spend $60,000 a year, you'd need $1.5 million. That's the traditional approach, and it's exactly why people think dividend retirement is impossible in 3 years. But here's where things get interesting. What if we flip the script entirely? Instead of trying to replace your current lifestyle, what if you designed a retirement lifestyle first and then built the portfolio to match it? Your current expenses probably include a mortgage or high rent, car payments, expensive insurance, commuting costs, work clothes, eating out because you're too tired to cook, and dozens of other expenses tied to your working life. But what if you could eliminate most of those costs? Let's say you moved to a lower cost area where you could buy a small house outright for $150,000. No mortgage payment. You buy a reliable used car with cash. No car payment. You grow some of your own food and cook most meals at home. You cancel subscriptions you don't really need. Suddenly, your monthly expenses drop to maybe $2,500 or $3,000 instead of $5,000 or $6,000. Here's the math that changes everything. To generate $3,000 per month in dividend income, you need a portfolio that pays $36,000 annually. With a 6% dividend yield, which is absolutely achievable with the right dividend stocks and REITs, you'd need a portfolio worth $600,000. Now, $600,000 still sounds like a lot, but it's not $1.5 million. And here's where the 3-year timeline becomes realistic. You don't need to save $600,000 from scratch. You need to build a portfolio worth $600,000, and there's a huge difference. The secret is leverage and aggressive growth strategies. I'm talking about using margin responsibly, focusing on high-yield dividend stocks that also have growth potential, and reinvesting every single dividend payment back into more shares. When you combine a high savings rate with strategic leverage and compounding growth, you can accelerate your timeline dramatically. Let's say you can save $50,000 per year through a combination of side hustles, cutting expenses, and maybe selling some assets. That's about $4,200 per month, which is aggressive but not impossible if you're serious about this goal. With the right dividend growth stocks averaging 8 to 10% total returns plus reinvested dividends, your money compounds much faster than traditional savings approaches. But here's the part that will blow your mind. You don't even need to hit $600,000 to start living off dividends. You could begin transitioning to part-time work once your portfolio generates $1,500 or $2,000 per month. That reduces the pressure on your portfolio while still moving you toward full financial independence. The truth is, most people never run these numbers because they assume it's impossible. But when you break down the actual requirements and get strategic about both earning and spending, the 3-year dividend retirement starts looking less like a fantasy and more like a very achievable goal. Now let's address the biggest obstacle to the 3-year plan. Where exactly are you supposed to get $50,000 per year to invest? Because let's be honest, if you had an extra $4,200 every month lying around, you probably wouldn't be watching videos about retiring in 3 years. Most people miss this. The capital problem isn't really about your current income. It's about the gap between what you earn and what you keep. The average person making $75,000 per year might only save $5,000 annually because they've let their expenses expand to match their income. But someone making $45,000 who's laser focused on their goal might save $25,000 by being strategic about every dollar. Your current lifestyle is costing you your freedom. Every subscription you don't use, every meal you order instead of cooking, every upgrade you don't really need is pushing your retirement timeline further into the future. But what if you treated the next 3 years like a financial boot camp? I'm not saying live on ramen noodles and never have fun. I'm talking about being intentional with your money in a way most people never are. You cancel the gym membership and work out at home. You drive your current car for 3 more years instead of upgrading. You move to a cheaper apartment or get roommates. You meal prep on Sundays instead of buying lunch every day. But here's where it gets really interesting. The capital problem isn't just about cutting expenses. It's about dramatically increasing your earning potential during these 3 years. This isn't the time to coast at your day job. This is the time to get aggressive about promotions, side hustles, and creating multiple income streams. Let's say you currently make $60,000 at your main job. You pick up freelance work on weekends that brings in an extra $1,000 per month. You sell stuff you don't need and make $3,000. You house sit for people when they travel and save $2,000 on rent over the year. You tutor kids in your area of expertise for $30 per hour, adding another $500 monthly. Suddenly you've added $20,000 to your annual income without changing your main job. Now combine that extra income with strategic expense cutting. You save $800 per month by moving to a smaller place. You save $400 per month by cooking at home and meal prepping. You save $300 per month by canceling subscriptions and being smarter about entertainment. That's another $18,000 in annual savings. We're talking about finding an extra $38,000 per year through a combination of earning more and spending less. Add that to whatever you're currently saving, and hitting $50,000 annually becomes much more realistic. But here's the part that really accelerates the timeline. You don't just save this money in a regular savings account. You immediately invest it in dividend-paying assets that start generating returns. So your $50,000 investment in year 1 might generate $3,000 in dividends that get reinvested. Your portfolio is growing from both your contributions and the compound returns. The capital problem is real, but it's not insurmountable. It requires treating these 3 years like the most important financial period of your life. Every dollar you can redirect toward investments is a dollar that starts working for you immediately. And when you're focused on a specific timeline with a specific goal, you'd be amazed at how creative you can get with finding that money. Now let's talk about one of the biggest mistakes people make when they get serious about dividend investing. They see a stock paying 8% or 10% dividends and think they've found the holy grail. Higher yield means more income, right? Not so fast. Here's what happens when you chase high dividend yields without understanding the underlying business. You end up with companies that are paying unsustainable dividends, often because their stock price has crashed or their business is declining. That 12% yield might look attractive, but if the company cuts the dividend next quarter, you're left with a worthless investment and no income. If a company is paying a 10% dividend yield when most solid companies pay 3-4%, there's usually a reason. Either the market thinks the dividend is about to be cut, or the company is in financial trouble. It's like seeing a house priced 50% below market value. Sure, it might be a great deal, but there's probably something seriously wrong with it. The yield trap catches people because they focus on the immediate income instead of the long-term sustainability. They see that high yield and imagine how much monthly income it would generate, but they don't research whether the company can actually afford to keep paying that dividend. Here's a better approach. Look for companies with dividend yields between 3% and 6% that have a history of consistently growing their dividends over time. A company that pays a 4% yield but increases that dividend by 8% annually is going to crush a company that pays 8% but never increases the payout. Let's say you invest $10,000 in a stock with a 4% yield that grows its dividend by 8% per year. In year 1, you earn $400 in dividends. But by year 5, that same investment is paying you $588 annually because the dividend kept growing. By year 10, you're earning $863 per year from that same $10,000 investment. Compare that to a high-yield trap stock that pays 8% but never grows. You earn $800 in year 1, but you're still earning $800 in year 10. Plus, there's a good chance that unsustainable 8% dividend gets cut along the way, leaving you with even less income. The math is clear. Sustainable dividend growth beats high yields every time. Companies like Johnson & Johnson, Coca-Cola, and Procter & Gamble might not offer the sexiest yields, but they've been increasing their dividends for decades. That consistency and growth is what builds real wealth over time. So when you're building your 3-year dividend portfolio, resist the temptation to chase those double-digit yields. Focus on quality companies with sustainable business models and growing dividend payments. Your future self will thank you when you're collecting reliable income instead of dealing with dividend cuts and declining stock values. All right, so you understand the math and you've avoided the yield traps. Now let's talk about the actual strategy that makes 3-year dividend retirement possible. This isn't about getting lucky with one stock pick or timing the market perfectly. It's about following 5 specific pillars that work together to accelerate your path to financial independence. Pillar number 1 is aggressive income optimization. I'm not talking about just getting a raise at your current job, though that helps. I'm talking about treating your earning potential like a business that needs to grow by 30% or more each year. You negotiate that promotion you've been putting off. You start freelancing in your spare time. You create a side business around a skill you already have. But here's the key. Every extra dollar you earn has a specific job. It goes directly into dividend investments, not into lifestyle inflation. Most people get a raise and immediately upgrade their apartment or buy a nicer car. You're going to do the opposite. You're going to live like you never got that raise and invest the difference. Pillar number 2 is expense optimization, but not in the way most people think. You're not cutting out coffee and hoping to save your way to retirement. You're making strategic decisions that reduce your fixed costs permanently. You move closer to work to eliminate commuting costs. You buy a reliable used car with cash instead of financing something newer. You learn to cook meals you actually enjoy instead of ordering takeout. The goal isn't to live like a monk for 3 years. The goal is to prove to yourself that you can live comfortably on much less than you currently spend. Because once you retire on dividends, you want to know exactly how much income you need to maintain a lifestyle you actually enjoy. Pillar number 3 is strategic portfolio construction. This is where most people get it wrong. They either go too conservative with dividend stocks that barely keep up with inflation, or they go too aggressive with growth stocks that don't pay any income. You need both growth and income working together. Here's the approach that works. About 60% of your portfolio goes into dividend growth stocks. These are companies like Microsoft, Apple, and Visa that pay modest dividends but increase them consistently every year. The other 40% goes into higher yield investments like REITs and dividend-focused ETFs that provide more immediate income. This combination gives you the best of both worlds. The dividend growth stocks provide capital appreciation and growing income over time. The higher yield investments provide the cash flow you need to start transitioning away from your job sooner rather than later. Pillar number 4 is reinvestment discipline. Every dividend payment goes right back into buying more shares. No exceptions. You're not using dividend income to pay bills or fund vacations during these 3 years. Every dollar of dividend income gets reinvested automatically through dividend reinvestment plans. This is where the magic of compounding really kicks in. Your dividends buy more shares, which generate more dividends, which buy even more shares. The snowball effect accelerates your timeline dramatically because you're not just saving money from your job. Your investments are generating their own money that immediately gets put back to work. Pillar number 5 is timeline flexibility with milestone targets. The 3-year goal isn't actually about retiring completely in exactly 36 months. It's about creating enough dividend income that you have options and flexibility much sooner than traditional retirement planning suggests. Maybe after 18 months, your portfolio generates $1,000 per month in dividends. That might not cover all your expenses, but it could let you negotiate a 4-day work week or take a lower-stress job that pays less. After 30 months, maybe you're generating $2,000 per month, which could cover your basic expenses if you've optimized them properly. The 3-year timeline creates urgency and focus, but the real goal is building a portfolio that gives you choices. Once you have significant dividend income coming in every month, you're not trapped in a job you hate or worried about getting laid off. You have what most people never get, which is real financial security. These 5 pillars work together in a way that traditional retirement advice doesn't account for. Most financial planners tell you to save 10 to 15% of your income and wait 30 years. But when you combine aggressive income growth with strategic expense reduction and focused dividend investing, you can compress that timeline dramatically. The key is treating these 3 years like the most important financial period of your life. Every decision gets filtered through the question of whether it moves you closer to or further from your dividend retirement goal. It's not easy, but it's absolutely possible if you're willing to be strategic and disciplined about the process. Now you might be thinking, this all sounds great in theory, but who actually pulls this off in real life? Let me tell you about the type of person who succeeds with the 3-year dividend retirement strategy, because it's probably not who you'd expect. It's not usually the high-income earners making 6 figures who achieve this goal. Those people often have lifestyle inflation that makes it harder to redirect large amounts toward investments. Instead, it's typically someone making between $50,000 and $80,000 who gets laser focused on the process and treats it like a part-time job. The successful candidates usually have a few things in common. First, they have a specific reason why traditional retirement timelines don't work for them. Maybe they hate their current career but feel trapped by financial obligations. Maybe they have health concerns that make working for 30 more years seem unrealistic. Maybe they just refuse to accept that they have to work until they're 65 to have financial freedom. Second, they're willing to make temporary sacrifices that most people won't make. They'll move to a smaller apartment for 3 years if it saves them $800 per month. They'll drive a 10-year-old car instead of financing something newer. They'll work extra hours on weekends and evenings to increase their income, even when they'd rather be relaxing. But here's what's interesting about the people who succeed. They don't see these as sacrifices. They see them as investments in their freedom. Every dollar they don't spend on lifestyle inflation is a dollar that starts generating dividend income immediately. They understand that 3 years of focused effort can replace 30 years of traditional retirement planning. The most successful people also tend to be naturally analytical. They track their progress obsessively. They know exactly how much dividend income they generated last month and how much they need to reach their next milestone. They treat their portfolio like a business and monitor its performance closely. They also tend to be contrarian thinkers who don't mind going against conventional wisdom. While their friends are financing new cars and upgrading their apartments, they're driving older vehicles and living below their means. They understand that most people's financial decisions are driven by emotion and social pressure rather than logic. Here's a typical profile of someone who achieves this goal. They're 28 to 45 years old, making around $65,000 per year at their main job. They pick up side income through freelancing or part-time work that adds another $15,000 annually. They live in a modest apartment or small house and keep their fixed expenses under $2,500 per month. They invest $45,000 to $50,000 per year in dividend-paying stocks and REITs, focusing on companies with sustainable business models and growing dividend payments. They reinvest every dividend automatically and never touch the money for other purposes. After 3 years, they have a portfolio worth $180,000 to $200,000, generating $8,000 to $12,000 in annual dividend income. That dividend income doesn't replace their full salary, but it covers their basic expenses and gives them the flexibility to transition to part-time work or pursue something they're more passionate about. Within another year or two, the growing dividends and continued investments push them to complete financial independence. The key insight is that these people don't wait until they have perfect conditions to start. They don't wait until they're making more money or until their expenses are lower. They start with whatever situation they're in and optimize aggressively from there. They understand that time is their most valuable asset and that waiting for ideal conditions is just another form of procrastination. Now, before we wrap up, let's talk about the elephant in the room. Maybe the pure dividend approach isn't right for your situation. Maybe you're willing to take on more risk for potentially faster results, or maybe you want a more balanced approach that doesn't require such aggressive lifestyle changes. Most people don't consider this. The 3-year timeline doesn't have to be all about dividends. You could use a growth-focused strategy and then transition to dividend income once you hit your target portfolio value. This approach might actually get you there faster, especially if you're starting with a smaller amount of capital. Instead of focusing on stocks that pay 4 to 6% dividends, you invest in growth companies that might appreciate 15-20% annually but pay little or no dividends. Companies like Amazon, Tesla, or emerging market ETFs that focus on capital appreciation rather than income distribution. The math works differently but can be more aggressive. Let's say you invest $40,000 per year in growth investments that average 12% annual returns. After 3 years, you'd have roughly $140,000. At that point, you could transition the entire portfolio into dividend-paying assets yielding 5 to 6%, which would generate $7,000 to $8,400 in annual income. But here's where the growth strategy gets interesting. You don't have to convert everything at once. You could gradually shift from growth to income as your portfolio reaches certain milestones. Maybe you start transitioning 20% of your holdings to dividend stocks once you hit $100,000, then another 20% at $150,000, and so on. This hybrid approach gives you the best of both worlds. You get the potential for faster capital appreciation during the accumulation phase, but you also build towards sustainable income for the retirement phase. Plus, it's psychologically easier because you're not dependent on dividend income from day one. Another alternative is the real estate approach. Instead of focusing on stocks at all, you could use your 3 years to acquire rental properties that generate immediate cash flow. With the right market conditions and financing strategies, you might be able to acquire 2 or 3 rental properties that collectively generate $2,000 to $3,000 in monthly net income. The real estate path requires more hands-on management and comes with different risks, but it can work faster than traditional stock investing because you're using leverage. A $50,000 down payment on a $200,000 rental property gives you exposure to the full property value, not just your cash investment. Here's what's crucial about any of these alternative strategies. The principles remain the same. You still need to optimize your income aggressively, keep your expenses under control, and invest the difference consistently. The 3-year timeline still requires the same level of focus and discipline, regardless of whether you're buying dividend stocks, growth companies, or rental properties. The choice between strategies often comes down to your personality and risk tolerance. If you want predictable income and don't mind potentially slower growth, stick with dividend investing. If you're comfortable with more volatility and want to maximize growth potential, consider the hybrid approach. If you don't mind being a landlord and want to use leverage, real estate might be your path. But here's the most important point. Don't let analysis paralysis stop you from starting. The biggest mistake people make is spending months researching the perfect strategy instead of just picking a reasonable approach and getting started. Whether you choose dividends, growth, real estate, or some combination, the key is consistent execution over the 3-year period. So there you have it. The impossible math of retiring on dividends in 3 years isn't actually impossible. It's just a different approach that requires more focus and discipline than most people are willing to commit to. Here's the truth about the 3-year timeline. It's not really about completely replacing your income in exactly 36 months. It's about building enough dividend income that you have real options and flexibility much sooner than traditional retirement planning suggests. Maybe after 2 years you can negotiate a 4-day work week. Maybe after 3 years you can take a lower stress job that pays less because your dividends cover the difference. The real goal is breaking free from the paycheck to paycheck cycle and creating genuine financial security. Once you have $1,500 or $2,000 per month coming from investments, you're not trapped anymore. You have what most people never get, which is real choices about how you spend your time. If you're currently living paycheck to paycheck or feeling stuck in a job you hate, don't panic. Start small, stay consistent, and focus on the fundamentals. Optimize your income, reduce your fixed expenses, and invest the difference in quality dividend-paying assets. Set up automatic reinvestment so your dividends immediately buy more shares. Track your progress monthly and celebrate the milestones. When you hit your first $100 in monthly dividend income, that's a real achievement. When you reach $500 per month, you're well on your way. Each milestone proves the strategy is working and builds momentum for the next phase. The choice is yours. You can accept the conventional wisdom that retirement takes 30 years and hope nothing goes wrong along the way. Or you can get aggressive about the next 3 years and create the financial freedom that most people only dream about.